I am Aaron Mitchell, 18 years old and valedictorian of Boston East High School. You would think that would make my parents proud, but I have always lived in the shadow of my sister Amber. Despite my perfect grades and test scores, they missed my graduation speech for her pedicure appointment. 22 years of being second best finally made sense when I discovered the adoption papers hidden in our attic. What happened next changed our family forever. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, what I am about to reveal will show you that sometimes the truth, however painful, is the only path to freedom. From as early as I can remember, books were my escape, and learning was my superpower. While other kids in our suburban Boston neighborhood were playing sports or video games, I was solving math problems and reading books meant for students twice my age. My elementary school teachers called my parents in for conferences, not because I was causing trouble, but because they were running out of ways to challenge me. Aaron is exceptionally gifted, they would say. He needs more advanced material. My parents, Richard and Margaret Mitchell, would nod politely, thank the teachers, and then immediately shift the conversation to how my sister Amber was doing in her classes. It became a pattern I recognized even at 8 years old. That is great about Aaron, my mother would say, but we are a bit concerned about Amber struggling with long division. What can we do to help her? Amber was 2 years older than me, but needed tutoring in most subjects. She was athletic, though a natural on the soccer field and later the track. My parents never missed her games or meets. They would cheer from the bleachers, take dozens of photos, and treat her to ice cream afterward, whether she won or lost. By the time I reached middle school, I had learned that academic achievements brought polite acknowledgement, while Amber's athletic ones brought celebration. When I won the regional science fair in 7th grade with a project on renewable energy, my parents gave me a quick, "Good job, buddy," before rushing off to Amber's track meet. When I placed first in the state math competition in 8th grade, they forgot to pick me up because they were shopping for new running shoes for my sister. I pushed myself harder. Perfect grades were no longer enough. I joined every academic club and competition I could find. Chess club president, science Olympiad team captain, debate team, model UN. I filled my room with trophies and medals that my parents rarely noticed. High school intensified my academic obsession. I took every advanced placement course offered, studying until 2 or 3 in the morning to maintain my 4.0 GPA. When my SAT results came back perfect, 2,400 out of 2,400, my father glanced at the paper and said, "Nice job. Hey, did you see Amber broke the school record in the 400-meter dash?" Junior year, Amber was offered a track scholarship to a decent state university. My parents threw her a party, invited the entire extended family, and bought her a used car as a pre-graduation gift. I sat in the corner watching as relatives fawned over her, thinking about the 4 Ivy League schools that had already expressed interest in me, not that anyone at home knew or cared. By senior year, I was emotionally exhausted but still pushing. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford had all accepted me with full academic scholarships. My guidance counselor was ecstatic. My parents responded with, "That is nice, but let us think about it. Those schools are expensive, even with scholarships, and we have been saving for years for Amber's college fund." When the announcement came that I would be valedictorian with the highest GPA in our school's history, I allowed myself a moment of hope. Surely this would be the achievement that would finally make them see me. The valedictorian gives a speech at graduation, a moment in the spotlight. Maybe they would finally be proud if they heard me speak in front of the entire school, if they saw the principal shake my hand with respect, if they witnessed other parents looking at them with envy. "I am going to be valedictorian," I told them at dinner one night, trying to keep my voice casual. "What does that mean?" my father asked between bites of pot roast. "It means I have the highest grades in the school. I get to give a speech at graduation." "Oh," my mother said, "that is nice. Amber, did you tell your father about your new track coach at college? The one who trained Olympic athletes?" And just like that, the conversation moved on, and my news evaporated into nothing. Still, I held on to hope that when the actual day came, when they sat in the audience and watched me at the podium, things would be different. I spent weeks drafting my speech, pouring everything into it, imagining my parents finally looking at me with the same pride they always showed Amber. I was wrong. So very wrong. The week before graduation was hectic for everyone. My sister was preparing to leave for a summer training program before her freshman year of college, and our house revolved around her needs. My mother took her shopping for dorm supplies, while my father researched the best running shoes and fitness trackers for her training. Meanwhile, I polished my valedictorian speech, working through draft after draft. I wanted it to be perfect, meaningful, not just to my classmates but to my parents. One evening I gathered my courage and asked my mother if she would listen to me practice. "Now is not a good time, Aaron," she said, scrolling through her phone. "I need to find a decent dorm refrigerator for your sister. The one the school provides is too small for her protein shakes and meal prep containers." "It would just take 10 minutes, I said. She barely looked up. "Maybe tomorrow." "Oh, and we are planning a big graduation party for Amber this weekend. Could you help your father set up the backyard tent on Saturday morning?" Of course, tomorrow never came. Neither did the next day or the day after that. By graduation morning, no one in my family had heard a single word of the speech I had poured my heart into. I woke up early that day, too nervous to sleep. Graduation was scheduled for 10 in the morning, and students needed to arrive by 8:30 for lineup and final instructions. I put on my dress pants and shirt, carefully laid out my graduation gown and cap on my bed, and went downstairs for breakfast. The house was oddly quiet. In the kitchen I found a note on the refrigerator. Erin Amber had an emergency with her nails before her graduation party. Taking her for a pedicure appointment. Dad came along to get the ice for the party. See you at the ceremony. Mom. I stood there reading and rereading the note, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. My sister's pedicure was an emergency, more important than being there for their son on his big day. I checked the time, 7:45. The salon opened at 8. The ceremony was at 10. They knew what they were choosing. I drove myself to graduation, parked in the student lot, and joined my classmates in the gymnasium for lineup. Everyone else seemed to have family members helping them with their caps and gowns, taking photos, giving hugs. I sat alone on the bleachers until it was time to line up. As valedictorian, I would be seated on stage with the principal and other speakers. I kept scanning the filling auditorium for my parents, hoping they would at least make it in time for the ceremony. The seat section reserved for families of honor students remained conspicuously empty, where my family should have been. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium, my carefully prepared speech in hand. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the proud parents with their cameras and tissues. My family's seats remained empty. I swallowed hard and began to speak. I delivered my speech about perseverance, about finding your own path, about defining success for yourself, rather than seeking approval from others. The irony was not lost on me. The audience applauded warmly when I finished. Several teachers gave me thumbs up. The principal shook my hand and whispered, "Excellent job, Aaron." But the seats that mattered remained empty. After the ceremony, as families gathered to take photos and celebrate, I stood awkwardly to the side, my diploma in hand, wondering what to do next. A few classmates' parents congratulated me on my speech. My physics teacher, Mr. Harmon, seemed to sense something was wrong and came over to shake my hand. "That was one of the best valedictorian speeches I have heard in 20 years of teaching," he said. "Your parents must be incredibly proud." I managed a weak smile and mumbled thanks before heading to my car. I drove home slowly, dreading what awaited me. When I arrived, the house was bustling with activity. The backyard was decorated with streamers and balloons. A banner reading, "Congratulations." Amber hung across the patio. Relatives were already arriving for my sister's graduation party, even though her actual ceremony was not until the following week. My parents were in the kitchen arranging food platters. They looked up when I entered. "Oh, Aaron, there you are," my mother said. "How was graduation?" "You missed it," I said flatly. My father had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Sorry about that, son. Amber had that emergency with her nail appointment, and then we had to get everything ready for the party." My valedictorian speech. "You missed my valedictorian speech for a pedicure appointment." My mother sighed. "Do not be dramatic, Aaron. We will watch the video when the school sends it. Besides, you know how important this party is for Amber. She has worked so hard for her scholarship. Amber walked in then, her toenails freshly painted in our school colors. The decorations look amazing. Thanks for taking me to get my nails done, Mom. They match the party theme perfectly. She noticed me standing there and added as an afterthought, "Oh hey, Aaron. How was your thing, Dad? Can you help move the speakers outside? My friends will be here soon." I stood there invisible as always, watching my family continue their preparations. No one asked about my speech again. No one commented on the honor I had received. No one seemed to care that I had just graduated at the top of my class. I went upstairs to my room, changed out of my graduation clothes, and sat on my bed staring at the wall. Something inside me had finally broken. This was not just disappointment anymore. This was the crushing realization that in this family I would always be an afterthought. But I had no idea that this painful day would lead me to discover why I had always been treated this way. The truth was hidden in our attic, buried under 22 years of lies. The weekend after graduation was unbearable. Our house was still littered with the remnants of Amber's pre-graduation party, and my parents were busy helping her prepare for her summer training program. I decided to start packing for college early, even though I had not yet decided which of my scholarship offers to accept. Anything to keep busy and avoid family interactions. I needed my birth certificate and social security card for college registration, but I was not sure where my parents kept important documents. My mother was out shopping with Amber and my father was golfing with his friends, so I took the opportunity to search their home office. After rifling through several drawers with no success, I remembered the filing cabinet in the attic where they kept old tax returns and insurance policies. The attic was hot and dusty, sunlight streaming through the small window at one end. I found the filing cabinet tucked behind some old Christmas decorations and began methodically going through each drawer. In the bottom drawer, behind a folder labeled House Documents, I found a thick manila envelope that caught my attention. It was sealed with string and looked official. Thinking it might contain birth certificates, I opened it. The first document I pulled out made my blood run cold. It was an adoption certificate with my name on it. Aaron James Mitchell, adopted by Richard and Margaret Mitchell, on September 10, 2004. I was born on April 15, 2004, making me 5 months old at the time of adoption. I sat back on the dusty attic floor, my hands shaking. Adopted, why had no one ever told me? My mind raced with questions and confusion. Was this why I had always felt like an outsider in my own family? Why Amber, their biological child, had always been favored? Digging deeper into the envelope, I found more documents, correspondence, with an adoption agency, medical records from my birth, and most shockingly, letters from someone named James Harrington, who appeared to be my biological father. The letters were dated throughout my childhood and teenage years. They were addressed to my parents, politely requesting updates about me and expressing interest in maintaining some connection. Many mentioned his desire to support my education and development. All of them seemed to have been opened and then resealed, never shared with me. One letter from when I was about 10 years old stood out. Dear Richard and Margaret, thank you for the school photo of Aaron. I can see his intelligence shining through his eyes just like his mother's. As mentioned in my previous letters, I would like to establish a college fund for him. As a professor of mathematics at MIT, I understand the value of education and would like to ensure Aaron has every opportunity to develop his clearly exceptional intellectual gifts. Please find enclosed a check for $10,000 as an initial contribution. I hope to make this an annual gift. Respectfully, James Harrington, Ph.D. There were more letters, each containing mentions of financial contributions for my education. According to these letters, my biological father had been sending money for years, specifically earmarked for my college education. Money I had never known about, while my parents claimed they needed to save for Amber's college fund. I kept searching and found a folder containing correspondence between my parents and several prestigious universities. Letters addressed to me that I had never seen offering special academic programs, summer internships, and early admission opportunities. There was even an invitation to a mathematics symposium for gifted students that had taken place during my sophomore year, an opportunity I would have treasured but never knew existed. The most recent letter from my biological father was dated just 3 months ago. Dear Richard and Margaret, as Aaron approaches graduation, I want to reiterate my desire to be part of his life. I understand and respect the boundaries you have established, but he will be an adult, soon capable of deciding for himself, if he wishes to know me. My offer to fully fund his college education at any institution of his choice still stands. Given his exceptional academic achievements, which I occasionally glimpse through public school records and competition results, he deserves every opportunity to pursue his education without financial constraints. I will be in Boston next month, and would welcome a chance to finally meet him with your blessing. Sincerely, James Harrington, Ph.D. At the bottom of the letter my mother had scribbled, "Absolutely not. Do not respond." Sitting there, surrounded by evidence of 22 years of deception, I felt a strange calm descend over me. The pieces were finally falling into place. My parents' constant favoritism toward Amber, their dismissal of my academic achievements, their reluctance to support my college plans despite my scholarships, all of it made a twisted kind of sense now. I had been brought into their family as an obligation perhaps, or as a companion for Amber. But they had never truly accepted me as their son. They had intercepted communications from my biological father, hidden opportunities from me, and possibly even used money meant for my education for other purposes, likely Amber's. I carefully gathered all the documents, placed them in my backpack, and returned the manila envelope to the filing cabinet with some blank paper inside to maintain its weight and feel. No one would know what I had discovered until I was ready. Back in my room, I spread the documents across my bed and began to organize them chronologically. A plan was forming in my mind. I would not confront my parents immediately. I needed more information first, and I needed to contact James Harrington, the father I never knew I had. I found his email address on one of the recent letters and drafted a message, then hesitated. What if he no longer cared? What if he had given up after years of being rebuffed by my adoptive parents? Number. The letters showed a consistent effort to be part of my life spanning nearly 2 decades. He deserved to know that I had finally discovered the truth, and I deserved to know the man who had tried so hard to be part of my life. I sent the email with my phone number explaining briefly who I was and that I had just discovered the adoption papers. Then I began to dig deeper into the financial aspects of what I had found. If my biological father had been sending money for my college education for years, where had it gone? Within hours of sending my email to James Harrington, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered with trepidation. "Hello. Is this Aaron Mitchell?" The voice on the other end was deep and steady. "Yes, this is Aaron." "Aaron, this is James Harrington. I received your email. I can hardly believe I am finally speaking with you." The emotion in his voice was unmistakable. We talked for over an hour, arranging to meet the following day at a coffee shop downtown, far from my neighborhood where my parents or their friends might see us. That night I could barely sleep. I continued examining the documents I had found using my laptop to research James Harrington. He was indeed a professor of mathematics at MIT, with an impressive list of publications and awards. According to his faculty profile, he specialized in number theory and cryptography. There were photos of him online, and I studied them intently, looking for resemblances. We had the same eyes, the same high forehead. It was strange and exhilarating to see my features reflected in a stranger's face. The next morning I told my parents I was meeting friends to discuss college plans. They barely looked up from helping Amber pack for her summer program. I drove downtown and arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, too nervous to sit still at home. When James Harrington walked in, I recognized him immediately. He was tall and lean with gray-streaked dark hair and glasses. He scanned the room, and when our eyes met, he stopped for a moment, a look of wonder crossing his face. "Aaron," he said simply as he approached my table. "Professor Harrington," I replied, standing awkwardly. "Please call me James, or whatever makes you comfortable." He seemed unsure whether to shake my hand or hug me, ultimately offering his hand, which I shook. We both ordered coffee, and spent the first few minutes in small talk that barely masked our mutual shock at finally meeting. Then the conversation deepened. I have tried to be part of your life since you were an infant, James explained. Your birth mother, Elizabeth, was one of my graduate students. Our relationship was brief but meaningful. When she became pregnant, she was in the middle of her doctoral program and felt she could not raise a child alone. I respected her decision to place you for adoption, but I never wanted to lose connection with you entirely. Did you know the Mitchells before the adoption? I asked. No, they were selected by the agency. The adoption was supposed to be semi-open, allowing for updates and possible contact as you grew older. I agreed to this arrangement rather than a fully open adoption to make it easier for Elizabeth, who wanted more distance. She moved to Europe after completing her doctorate. We have not been in contact for many years. James took a sip of his coffee. At first, the Mitchells sent photos and updates as agreed. But as the years passed, they became increasingly resistant to any contact. They would return my letters and gifts. Eventually, they only communicated through the adoption agency, and then even that stopped. But you kept sending money for my education, I said. James nodded. Yes, I established a trust for you. The adoption agreement allowed me to contribute financially to your future education. I sent substantial amounts over the years. By my calculation, there should be over $200,000 in that account by now. I felt sick. I never knew about any of this. They told me they had been saving for my sister's college, that they might not be able to help much with mine despite my scholarships. James frowned. That money was legally designated for your education only. If they used it for other purposes, that would be a serious breach of the adoption agreement and possibly illegal. We talked for hours. James told me about his work, his life, and his consistent efforts to be part of my life. He had followed my academic achievements from afar, occasionally learning about them through public announcements of competition winners or honor rolls. I was so proud when I saw your name in the Boston Globe as a National Merit Scholar, he said. I sent a congratulatory letter to your parents hoping they would share it with you. I guess they never did. No, I confirmed. They never mentioned anything. After our meeting, I continued my investigation with renewed purpose. I used the information James had provided about the trust fund to track down the financial records. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. My parents had indeed received regular payments from the trust established by James. However, bank statements I found in their home office showed transfers from an account labeled Aaron College Fund to various other accounts, including one called Amber Activities and another for home renovations. They had systematically diverted money meant for my education to other purposes, primarily Amber's sports training equipment and travel to competitions. The new car they had given her as a pre-graduation present had been purchased with money from my trust fund. I also discovered credit card statements showing charges for expensive running shoes, private coaching sessions, and sports camps for Amber, all paid from the account meant for my education. Meanwhile, they had been telling me we might not be able to afford the expensive Ivy League schools that had offered me admission and scholarships. The depth of the deception was staggering. They had not only hidden my adoption from me, but had actively intercepted communication from my biological father, hidden opportunities that could have enriched my academic development, and misappropriated funds specifically designated for my education. Over the next few days, I met with James several more times. He introduced me to a lawyer friend who specialized in trust law, who confirmed that what my parents had done was likely illegal and certainly unethical. The lawyer suggested several possible courses of action, from a formal legal complaint to a simple confrontation with documentation. Before you make any decisions, James advised, consider what outcome you want. Is it financial restitution, legal consequences for your adoptive parents, or simply acknowledgement and change in your relationship going forward? I thought carefully about his question. What did I want? The hurt and betrayal ran deep, but I was not sure I wanted to see the only parents I had ever known face legal charges. At the same time, I could not simply pretend nothing had happened. I want the truth to be acknowledged, I finally said. I want them to admit what they did to face the consequences in terms of family relationships, if not legal ones. And I want to make my own decisions about my future without their interference. James nodded. That seems reasonable and mature. How do you want to proceed? The answer came to me with sudden clarity. Amber's graduation party, The whole family will be there. It is the perfect time to bring everything into the open. As the day of Amber's graduation and subsequent party approached, I prepared carefully. I organized all the documentation, chronologically made copies of everything, and prepared a clear, factual summary of what I had discovered. James and I developed a plan. He would arrive at the party at my signal, waiting nearby until needed. I was not seeking revenge. I simply wanted the truth to be known, the lies to end, and my future to be my own. Amber's graduation ceremony was on a Saturday morning, followed by an elaborate backyard party at our house. Unlike my graduation, which had been treated as an inconvenience, hers was the social event of the season in my parents' minds. They had hired caterers, rented a tent and tables, and invited extended family, neighbors, and what seemed like half the town. I attended the ceremony with my parents sitting silently between them in the auditorium. When Amber crossed the stage to receive her diploma, they cheered loudly, my father whistling through his fingers, while my mother took video with her phone. I clapped politely, my mind elsewhere, rehearsing what I would say later. Back at the house, guests began arriving around 2 in the afternoon. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends filled our backyard, bearing gifts and congratulatory cards for Amber. I moved through the crowd, greeting people with practiced smiles, waiting for the right moment. My grandfather, my father's father, pulled me aside at one point. "I heard you were valedictorian, Aaron. That is quite an achievement. Sorry we could not make it to your ceremony." "Thanks, Grandpa," I said. At least someone had acknowledged it. "So Harvard, huh? Your grandmother and I are very proud." I was surprised he knew about Harvard, since I had not yet told anyone which school I would attend. "Who told you I was going to Harvard?" "Your father mentioned it when we called last week. Said you got a full scholarship. Pretty impressive kid." I nodded, filing away this information. My parents had apparently been discussing my college plans without consulting me, after telling me we might not be able to afford it despite my scholarships. Around 4 o'clock, when most guests had arrived and were eating and mingling, my father called for everyone's attention. He stood on the small deck, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Margaret and I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate our daughter's graduation," he began. "Amber has made us proud in so many ways, and we are excited to see her start at State University on her track scholarship." Guests applauded as Amber beamed. "We have a little surprise for our star athlete," my father continued. "Amber, we know how important your training is, and we want to support your college career in every way possible. So we have decided to rent you an apartment near campus, instead of having you live in the dorms. It will give you more space for your equipment and more freedom to focus on your training schedule." More applause followed as Amber squealed with delight and hugged my parents. I stood frozen, knowing that such an apartment would cost thousands of dollars per month, likely coming from my misappropriated trust fund. And my mother added, "We will be covering all your expenses beyond the scholarship, so you can focus entirely on your athletics and studies." That was my cue. I stepped forward, moving to stand near my parents on the deck. "That is very generous," I said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I am curious, though. Will you be using my college fund to pay for Amber's apartment?" A confused silence fell. My father gave me a warning look. "Aaron, this is not the time." "Actually, I think this is exactly the time," I countered, my voice steady. "I have some news to share with the family, too." My mother tried to intervene. "Aaron, please, this is your sister's day." "Yes, it always is not it?" I said. "But today I think we need to clear the air about a few things. For instance, did you know that I was adopted?" The shocked murmurs from the guests confirmed that this was not common knowledge in our extended family. My grandmother gasped audibly. "Aaron, that is enough," my father said, firmly trying to guide me away from the gathering. I stood my ground. "I just found out myself, actually. Last week, while looking for my birth certificate in the attic, I discovered my adoption papers. Interesting reading. Even more interesting were the letters from my biological father that were hidden from me my entire life." Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, looked stunned. "Margaret, you never told us Aaron was adopted." "It was not important," my mother said tightly. "We are his parents in every way that matters." "Except you never told me the truth," I said. "And you hid the fact that my biological father wanted to be part of my life. You intercepted his letters, returned his gifts, and ignored his requests to meet me. Guests were now openly staring, some looking uncomfortable, others fascinated by the unfolding drama. But the really interesting part, I continued, was discovering that my biological father, Professor James Harrington of MIT, had been contributing to a trust fund for my education since I was a baby, a fund that now should contain over $200,000. My father's face had turned pale. "Aaron, this is a private family matter. We can discuss this later." "No, I think the family should hear this," I insisted, "especially since you just announced using money for Amber's apartment. Money that legally belongs to me, designated specifically for my education." I pulled out copies of the financial records I had gathered. I have bank statements showing transfers from my education trust to accounts for Amber activities, home renovations, and even the car you gave Amber for graduation. Money that was legally earmarked for my education that you diverted for other purposes. The backyard had fallen completely silent. Amber was staring at our parents, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as the implications sank in. "Is that true?" she asked them. "You used Aaron's money for my stuff." My father attempted damage control. "It is more complicated than that. We always intended to replace the funds. We were just borrowing temporarily." "For 22 years, I asked. "Because according to these records, you have been diverting money since I was a toddler." My Uncle Robert, always the practical one, stepped forward. "Richard, if what Aaron is saying is true, this is serious. Misappropriation of trust funds is illegal." "It is all a misunderstanding," my mother insisted, her voice shrill. "Aaron is just upset because he feels we favor Amber." "Feel," I repeated. "You missed my valedictorian speech for her pedicure appointment. You have systematically dismissed my academic achievements while celebrating her athletic ones. You told me we might not be able to afford the colleges that accepted me, while secretly planning to rent her an apartment using my trust fund money." I turned to face the gathered family members, but the worst part is not the money, it is the lies. The hiding of my adoption, the interception of communication from my biological father, the deliberate suppression of opportunities that were meant for me. My grandmother approached my parents, her expression stern. "Richard, Margaret, is this true? Have you been keeping Aaron's adoption a secret all these years? Even from us?" My father's defiance crumbled under his mother's gaze. "We thought it would be easier if everyone just considered him our son, period. No complications." "And the money Uncle Robert pressed?" My mother bit her lip. "We always meant to use it for his education eventually." "After spending most of it on Amber?" I asked. Amber had moved away from our parents, her face stricken. "I never knew," she said softly. "All those years, all those expensive training camps and equipment, that was Aaron's money." I nodded. "Not your fault. You did not know." The confrontation might have continued there, but I had one more revelation to make. I checked my phone and sent a text message. A minute later, the gate to our backyard opened and James Harrington walked in. "Who is that?" several guests murmured. I walked over to meet him, then turned to face my family. "Everyone, I would like you to meet Professor James Harrington, my biological father." A collective gasp went through the gathering as James Harrington stood beside me. The physical resemblance between us was unmistakable, especially standing together, and several relatives glanced back and forth between us in shock. My father recovered, first stepping forward with an artificial smile. "This is a private family event. I am going to have to ask you to leave." "Actually," I said clearly, I invited him. And given that he is my biological father who has been trying to be part of my life for 22 years, I think he has more right to be here than most people. James remained calm and dignified. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I am not here to cause trouble. I simply want what I have always wanted, a relationship with my son." My mother's face had gone white. "We had an agreement through the adoption agency. Semi-open adoption with updates only." "That is not true," James replied, his voice firm but not angry. "I have copies of the original adoption agreement, which specified ongoing contact as Aaron grew older, as well as my right to contribute to his education and development. You violated that agreement almost immediately." I stepped forward, holding up a folder. "I have the evidence right here. 22 years of lies and deception all documented. I turned to our assembled relatives. My parents not only hid my adoption from me but actively prevented my biological father from having any relationship with me despite the terms of the adoption agreement. I began methodically presenting the evidence, one damning piece at a time. Here are letters from James that were hidden from me dating back to when I was a toddler. I held up several letters asking about my development, offering support, expressing his desire to be part of my life in whatever way my parents deemed appropriate. I moved on to the financial documents. Here are records of the trust fund James established for my education, with regular contributions over 22 years. I placed those on a nearby table, then added, "And here are bank statements showing how my parents systematically diverted that money to other purposes, primarily Amber's activities and their own home improvements." Uncle Robert picked up some of the statements, examining them with a frown. "Richard, this looks very bad. These transfers are clearly documented." My father tried another approach. "We raised you, Aaron. We changed your diapers, nursed you through illnesses, put a roof over your head. Does none of that count?" "Of course it counts," I replied. "I am not saying you were not parents to me. I am saying you lied to me, hid my origins from me, and stole money that was legally designated for my education. Being parents does not give you the right to do those things." Aunt Susan had moved to comfort my mother, but her expression was troubled. "Margaret, how could you keep this from everyone? From Aaron himself, he had a right to know." "We were protecting him," my mother insisted. "We did not want him to feel different or unwanted. So instead you made me feel invisible and unimportant," I countered. "You consistently favored Amber and dismissed my achievements. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" My grandmother had been examining the letters from James. "These go back 20 years, she said, her voice trembling. "This man has been trying to be part of Aaron's life since he was a baby." "We thought it would confuse him," my father said defensively. "Having two fathers." James spoke up. "I never insisted on being called father or taking your place, Mr. Mitchell. I simply wanted some connection with my son to support his development, especially given his academic gifts, which clearly come from his mother's side and mine." I continued presenting evidence. Here are invitations and opportunities that were sent to me but hidden by my parents. Summer science programs, mathematics competitions, academic enrichment opportunities that I never knew about because my parents intercepted the mail. The faces of my relatives showed increasing shock and dismay as the extent of the deception became clear. And finally I said, "Here is a letter from Harvard University, addressed to me confirming my full academic scholarship plus a stipend for living expenses. A letter my parents hid from me while telling me we might not be able to afford for me to go there even with scholarships." I looked directly at my parents. "Why? Why would you hide that from me?" My father looked away, but my mother finally broke. "Because we did not want you to go so far away. We were losing Amber to her training program, and we did not want to lose you too. And yes, we spent some of your trust fund on Amber's needs, but we always intended to support your education somehow." "With what money?" I asked. "You spent most of my trust fund. Were you planning to take out loans in my name? Or were you hoping I would just go to community college and stay nearby?" My question was met with telling silence. Amber had been standing to the side, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed everything. Now she stepped forward. "I never knew any of this," she said, her voice breaking. "All those years, all that money spent on me, I thought we were just a normal family with normal finances. I never knew it was coming from Aaron's fund." She turned to me. "I am so sorry, Aaron. I had no idea they missed your valedictorian speech for my stupid pedicure. I would never have asked them to take me if I had known." I believed her. Amber had been self-centered at times, but she had never been knowingly cruel. She had been as much a pawn in our parents' dysfunctional family dynamic as I had been. "It is not your fault," I told her. "You did not know." She turned to our parents, her expression hardening. But they did. They knew exactly what they were doing. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the backyard, heading toward the street. Through the fence, I could see her collapse on the curb, shoulders shaking with sobs. The party had completely disintegrated. Some guests were quietly leaving, while others stood in awkward groups unsure what to do. My grandparents and several aunts and uncles remained their faces showing a mix of shock, anger, and concern. My grandfather approached my father. "Richard, I have never been so disappointed in you and Margaret. To lie to everyone, including your own son, for all these years. I do not even know what to say." My grandmother turned to me. "Aaron, I am so sorry we never knew. We would have been there for your graduation, for all your achievements, if we had understood." James stood quietly beside me, a supportive presence, but not intruding on the family drama. When my grandmother noticed him again, she approached and extended her hand. "Mr. Harrington, I want to apologize for how our family has treated you. No one should be kept from their child like that." James shook her hand. "Thank you. I never wanted to disrupt Aaron's life or family relationships. I simply wanted some connection with him." My father made one last, desperate attempt to regain control. "None of this changes the fact that we are Aaron's legal parents. We raised him. One mistake does not erase 22 years of parenting." "No," I agreed. "It does not erase it, but it does change everything going forward." I turned to James. "My biological father has offered to support my education at Harvard, as he always intended to do. I have decided to accept his offer. I will be living with him in Cambridge this summer before starting classes in the fall." The announcement hit my parents like a physical blow. My mother began to cry in earnest, while my father's face showed a mix of anger and fear. "You cannot just leave," he sputtered. "We are your family." "Yes, you are," I acknowledged. "And maybe someday we can have a healthier relationship. But right now I need space and time to process 22 years of lies. I need to get to know the father who has been trying to reach me my entire life. And I need to make my own decisions about my future." I gathered the documents I had presented and returned them to my folder. "I am not pursuing legal action over the misappropriated trust funds," I told my parents. "James and I discussed it, and we both feel that would only create more pain. But you should know that what you did was illegal, and the only reason you are not facing charges is because I chose not to press them." My Uncle Robert, always practical, asked, "When will you be leaving?" "Tonight," I replied. "I have already packed what I need. James has a guest room ready for me." My announcement caused another stir among the remaining family members. My grandmother approached me, tears in her eyes. "Will we still see you? You are still our grandson regardless of biology." I hugged her. "Of course. This is not about rejecting my extended family. It is about finding space to heal and moving forward with truth instead of lies." As the confrontation wound down, I noticed Amber had returned to the yard, her eyes red from crying. She approached me hesitantly. "Can we talk privately?" We moved to a quiet corner of the yard. "I never knew any of this," she said again. "All these years I thought Mom and Dad were just really supportive of my athletics. I never realized they were diverting your money, dismissing your achievements, hiding your adoption." She wiped her eyes. "No wonder you always seemed so distant. I thought you just did not like me." "I never disliked you," I told her. "I resented the favoritism, but that was not your fault." She nodded. "What happens now, to us, I mean, as siblings?" I considered her question. "I do not know. I need some time. But you are still my sister Amber. That has not changed." She gave me a sad smile. "Just not the only child they pretended I was for all these years." As the party continued to dissolve around us, I made my final preparations to leave. I said goodbye to my grandparents, and other relatives, exchanged contact information with those I wanted to stay in touch with, and retrieved my pre-packed bags from my room. My parents made one last emotional plea as I prepared to leave with James. "Please do not do this," my mother begged. "We can work this out as a family." "I am not cutting you out of my life permanently," I told them, "but I need time and space, and when or if we rebuild our relationship, it will be on terms of honesty and respect." As James and I walked to his car, I heard Amber's sobs from the backyard. The sound cut through me, a reminder that the truth, while necessary, came with its own pain. But as we drove away, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was choosing my own path based on truth, rather than seeking validation from parents who had never really seen me. The summer before college became a period of both healing and discovery. Living with James in his Cambridge home gave me space to process the revelations that had upended my life and to begin building a relationship with my biological father. James was careful not to rush things. He showed me his home office with its walls of mathematics books, introduced me to colleagues who stopped by, and gave me freedom to set the pace of our interactions. We discovered shared interests beyond mathematics, including classical music and hiking. "I do not expect you to call me Dad," he told me during our first week together. "James is fine, or whatever makes you comfortable. I just want the chance to know you." I appreciated his sensitivity. It would take time to figure out what to call him, what place he would have in my life. But his patience and genuine interest in me as a person were a balm after years of feeling invisible in my own family. 2 weeks after I moved in with James, my parents reached out via email asking to meet. I suggested a public place, a cafe, halfway between Cambridge and our suburban home. James offered to come with me, but I decided to go alone. They looked different, somehow smaller and older than I remembered. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, and my father seemed to have developed a nervous twitch in his right hand. "We miss you," my mother said immediately. "The house feels empty without you." "We have done a lot of thinking," my father added. "We know we handled everything wrong. The adoption, the trust fund, your achievements. All of it." I listened silently, waiting to see if their apology would include excuses or justifications. It did not. "We have no right to ask for forgiveness," my mother continued. "But we want you to know we are getting counseling to understand why we did what we did. We hope someday you might be willing to have a relationship with us again on your terms." "I appreciate that," I said. "I need time, but I am not cutting you out of my life forever. I just need to establish my own identity now without the lies and favoritism." They nodded, accepting my terms without argument. As we parted, my father handed me an envelope. "We sold some investments," he said. "It is not nearly enough to replace what should have been in your trust fund, but it is a start. We will continue to pay back what we diverted, even though you have your father's support now." The envelope contained a cashier's check for $25,000. It was a fraction of what had been diverted from my trust fund over the years, but the gesture mattered more than the amount. Surprisingly, it was Amber who made the most consistent effort to rebuild our relationship. She texted regularly, called once a week, and eventually asked if she could visit Cambridge. When she arrived at James's house, she seemed nervous but determined. "I have deferred my athletic scholarship for a year," she announced over lunch. "I am working full-time and taking community college classes instead." "Why?" I asked, surprised. "Because I need to know that I can achieve something on my own, without Mom and Dad's excessive support, and because I do not want to benefit from money that should have been yours." Her decision impressed me. We spent the day exploring Cambridge together, talking more openly than we ever had. She shared her own struggles with our parents' expectations, the pressure to excel athletically, the fear of disappointing them. They put so much emphasis on my running that I never felt I had value beyond that, she admitted. In a weird way, they did to both of us. They reduced me to the athlete, and you to the brain, never seeing either of us as complete people. Her insight helped me understand our family dynamic from a new perspective. While I had been neglected in favor of Amber, she had been burdened with being the favorite, defined solely by her athletic abilities. Neither situation was healthy. Over the summer, I also met several times with a therapist. James recommended processing my feelings about the adoption revelation, the years of favoritism, and my changing family relationships. The therapist helped me see that while my anger was justified, holding on to it would only hurt me in the long run. "Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing," she explained. "It means releasing the power the situation has over you, allowing yourself to move forward without being defined by what happened." As August approached, and with it the start of my freshman year at Harvard, I felt more at peace than I had in years. James had helped me set up my new dorm room. My grandparents had visited Cambridge to see where I would be living, and even my parents had respected my boundaries while making small attempts at reconciliation. One evening, James and I sat on his back porch watching the sunset. "Are you nervous about starting classes?" he asked. "A little," I admitted, "but mostly excited. For the first time, I feel like I am pursuing education for myself, not to earn approval or validation." He nodded thoughtfully. "That is how it should be. Knowledge for its own sake, for the joy of discovery and understanding." "I never thanked you," I said after a moment of silence. "For what?" "For not giving up. For trying to reach me for 22 years, even when my parents blocked you at every turn." James smiled. "You are my son. I always felt connected to you, even when we could not communicate directly. And now, having the chance to know you as a person, I see it was worth every effort." My first semester at Harvard was challenging but exhilarating. Free from the shadow of family dynamics, I found myself enjoying learning in a way I never had before. I made friends who appreciated me for who I was, not just my academic abilities. Amber visited during family weekend in October, bringing news that she had started counseling and was developing interests beyond running. "I am taking a photography class," she told me. "It is the first thing I have ever done just because I enjoy it, not to win competitions or please mom and dad." My parents did not come to family weekend, respecting my request for space. But they sent a card expressing their pride in me and their hope that I was thriving. It was a small gesture but significant in its restraint and respect for my boundaries. By Thanksgiving, I felt ready to see them again. I invited them to Cambridge for dinner with James, Amber, and me. The meeting was awkward at times, but ultimately productive. My parents seemed genuinely committed to change, to seeing both Amber and me as individuals, rather than extensions of their expectations. "We cannot undo the past," my father said as we parted, "but we are trying to do better going forward. It would take years to fully heal the family wounds, to build new relationships based on honesty and respect rather than lies and favoritism. Some days were harder than others. Some memories still stung, but gradually I found myself able to think of my family without the immediate rush of anger and hurt." James became an important part of my life, a mentor and friend as well as a biological father. We discovered shared traits and interests that went beyond academics, from our dry sense of humor to our preference for mountains over beaches. He never tried to replace my adoptive parents, but instead created his own unique relationship with me. As my freshman year progressed, I found myself no longer defined by the need to prove my worth through academic achievement. I still worked hard and excelled in my classes, but now because I genuinely loved learning, not because I was seeking validation. Looking back on that devastating day when my parents chose Amber's pedicure over my valedictorian speech, I realize it was the breaking point that ultimately led to truth and healing. Had they attended my graduation, I might never have searched the attic, never discovered my adoption papers, never found my biological father, and never broken free from the dysfunctional family patterns that had shaped my childhood. Sometimes the most painful moments can lead to the most necessary growth. The truth about my adoption was like ripping off a bandage covering a festering wound. Painful, yes, but necessary for real healing to begin. As I finish this story, I want to ask you, have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? Have you had to rebuild relationships after betrayal or deception? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the hardest truths lead to the most authentic lives. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in facing your own truths, whatever they may be.